Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, everybody. Our official 2023 college football season preview, kickoff, whatever you want to call it. Back with the live streams on this Tuesday, August 22nd, the first week of college football. How about that? College football starts this Saturday. And so we had to take advantage of this opportunity to come back, to get on a live stream with you guys, and to just discuss this upcoming season, discuss any questions you may have, any big topics that you're going to have as this season, again, is slated to begin on Saturday afternoon. We cannot be more excited about it, and we could not be more excited to announce that we're going to be doing this every single Tuesday. Every single Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time, just like we're doing today. We're going to be right here doing a live stream with you guys today, not taking calls. We are going to have, here in about 15, 20 minutes or so, we're going to have our friend Connor Hibbett over from College Football Encyclopedia joining us in this live stream to kind of get some of his takes on the season, some of his storylines that we're watching out for. So we're going to have discussion with him that will also kind of combine discussion with you guys in the chat. But next week, after week 0, really going into week 1, we will have another live stream, full call-in show, 2 hours, however long it may be, where we get more of your questions and comments and concerns and everything like that. So if we don't get to your stuff today, come back next week at 7 p.m. Central Time, and we'll be ready for it. But again, we're so glad that you guys could join us today to kind of kick off this season, a season that really is going to be one for the ages, I feel like. It's a historic year, guys. I mean, we say that every year, but this is the last little bit of normalcy that we'll have in college football for a very long time, right? You know, the Texas and Oklahoma joined the SEC next year. The Pac-12 completely falling apart. All those members are going to be joining their new conferences next year. Next year, we're going to have an expanded college football playoff. So it's this last little bit of college football as we've known it for like the last decade, 2 decades or so, before next year everything changes. So that's some really, really fun storylines to kind of watch out for as we enter this year. I want to give a couple shout outs to the guys that are already here, right? Our man Thlobe. He commented early today, like 4:30, said he can't wait for this. So I'm glad you're here, my man. And hey, it's okay if you haven't been able to watch a lot of the videos. I hope everything's doing okay. I know life does kind of catch up to us sometimes, so I hope everything's okay on your end. Of course, always here for you, my man. Here for everybody here in the GE Nation. But we appreciate you and your support. Robert, what's going on, man? Yeah, you can get a Go Dogs. Go Dogs, baby. I don't have any Georgia gear in my background right now, but I'll give you a Go Dogs. 3-peat incoming and 2 questions. Who's the most overrated player in team and underrated player? I'll save that, Robert, because we might get to that here later on the stream when we talk to Connor. UCFEZ, Charge on Knights. I also am very excited for that UTEP game. Going to be a fun one, fun atmosphere down in Alabama. Some people think that Jacksonville is in Florida, which there is, but there's also Jacksonville State in Alabama. So it should be a fun game between UTEP and the Gamecocks. Very excited for that one on Saturday afternoon. My man, Matthew Hazelhorse, what's going on, man? Our resident K-State fan. It is indeed live season. It's indeed live season. And we're going to be, like as we mentioned, doing this live stream every single Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central Time. We'll make sure to put out reminders. We'll make sure to put out the alerts, kind of like we did this time around. But take advantage of it, guys. We want you to come join our GE Nation. We want you to join in on the discussion and the debate that we're going to be bringing to the table every single week. So every Tuesday, put it on your calendar because we want you here. So Matthew, appreciate you and your support, man. Glad to see you here. Scotty, good to see you. Hope you're staying cool. It's here in Arkansas where I am. It's the heat index is like 115. So it's been absolutely miserable. Even just walking out to your car, you're breaking a huge, huge sweat. A lot of high school football games this Friday have already been postponed. Either till later in the night or maybe into like next week because the heat has just been so bad. So definitely hope you guys are staying safe through there. So hope the people that if you're from California, staying safe through that hurricane and tropical storm, and especially the thoughts and prayers go out to everybody in Hawaii as well with the devastating fires over on Maui. My man James S. is here. Good to see you. Happy you're here. LSU Guru is here. Good to see you as well. Go Tigers. We got some LSU gear back there. Got some LSU helmets back there. So got to represent the Tigers, who are a legitimate college football playoff contender. Flobe says the same thing. Hey, Eddie, quarterback that can save Drinkwitz' job, that's going to be the $1 million question, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. I don't know who it's going to be. I know, Brady was solid last year for the most part, but Garcia is going to be pretty good. I think Garcia was highly touted coming in. I know a lot of people are high on Sam Horn. I mean, it's a three-man battle right now, and I think you're going to see a little bit with Missouri, with as favorable as the schedule is early on. I think you have an opportunity to see a couple of quarterbacks get their fair share. Who do they open up against? Like South Dakota or something like that? Isn't it South Dakota in week one? That's a good opportunity for them to kind of figure out some issues on offense, new offensive coordinator, things like that, and could kind of take off from there. My man Clement, good to see you. Good to see you, Clement. I'm happy to see you guys. And guys, hey, make sure you hit that live stream or hit that like button. Hit that like button. We've got over 24 people here in the stream. We're happy to have every single one of you. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe. If you're not, we appreciate your subscription, but hit that like button. We got 24 people. We want 24 likes. Let's get it. Helps our analytics big time. It helps our channel grow. So take advantage of that. Hey, Paxton, good to see you. James S., what do I think of UTEP and Jacksonville State? UTEP alternate line -3 for plus money. James, check out those expert picks, my guy. If you check out our expert picks, we'll tell you exactly who to bet on, and we can pretty much guarantee you're going to win it as well. So I don't want to give out free bets here, man, because that would be a disservice to our expert pick subscribers. But as we mentioned, if you sign up for those expert picks, you get guaranteed winnings. I promise you that, guaranteed winning record. Guaranteed access to us to ask us any questions, just like the one you have there, and you'll get an answer within the day. You will also, everybody else should mention, if we reach 100 expert pick subscribers, we'll be doing a 24-hour live stream. I'm sure you guys would eat that up. I'd eat that up. I might die from it, but I'd eat it up. So if we can reach 100 expert pick subscribers this season, and we're already well on our way, well ahead of schedule, think about 20% of the way there before the season hasn't even started yet. If we can get there, 24-hour live stream right here on the channel, and some discounts involved as well. So spread the word. Help us get to that goal. James, definitely contribute to that as well. We'd appreciate it. DM, my guy. What's up, DM? Good to see you, my man. Really appreciate that comment. So glad that you could be here. Again, it's not going to be solely me today. It will be solely me next week, and we're excited for that. But we're going to have our guy Connor on here in just a little over 10 minutes, and he's going to give you guys some great insight as well. But DM, really appreciate you. Glad you're here. Stephen Cuffey, good to see you. Doggy, good to see you. Really happy to have you here. Joker NYC, good to see you as well. Dale Campbell, happy to see you. Thanks for being here. Robert, yes, I will. We'll be doing trap games in our live streams for sure. We're going to cram a lot into those Tuesdays, so I'm very excited for that. College football guy, good to see you. Talk is Pitt, also nice to have you. It's not a rare live stream. It's not a rare live stream, right? I mean, there's only so much you can do during the off season, and we're so focused on getting those predictions out for you guys that, if you saw the amount of time that was put in behind the scenes with those team by team predictions, game by game predictions, you would understand that we can't do live streams as frequently as we want during the summer. But when the season starts, all bets are off. Still got a lot of regular content to crank out, but we want to put out the live stream. So we're going to be doing that again every single Tuesday. Every single Tuesday. So really, really excited about that. Let's see. Doggy says, that me or the video quality is bad? He goes, nope, it's me. Good. I'm glad it's you. If something screwed up, I'd want to know so we can fix it on our end. GT, hey, Gridiron Expert, I have an extra A&M mini helmet. Yes, we are, man. We're extremely interested in that. Dude, we'd love it. We would love it. Send it our way. The address should be, if it's not in this description of this live stream, it will be in every other video that we've produced over the course of the summer. We just put out a post thanking our man Keto for, show it off here. Got this nice, we haven't been able to hang it up yet. This nice Washington pennant. How about that? From our guy Keto. We're desperately in need of more helmets, more than anything, since we have a little bit limited wall space. Working on expanding that. But yeah, an A&M helmet, absolutely. So GT, we appreciate that. That goes for everybody. Any gear you have, send it our way for sure. Let's see. College football guy, good to see you, man. Happy to have you here. Super pumped to have you here. Appreciate all the comments, all of the videos, by the way. And let's see. Hey, Matthew, dude, bring it on. I need an excuse for a cross-country flight to Arkansas, training for commercial. We ought to lunch it up. Dude, let's go. You let me know. You let me know when you're here. I'll make it happen. I can drive anywhere in the state, man. I'm sometimes in Central Arkansas. Sometimes I'm all over the state, man. So you, Matthew, send me an email, bro. Send me an email. Let's lunch it up. Shoot me an email and let's get you on that cross-country flight over here. I love it. And lunch is on me. Lunch is on me, my guy. Let's make it happen. Make it happen. I love it. Eugene Murphy, good to see you, my man. UCF, let's address that, and then let's bring in Connor. I want to address that question. Pulled up. I love that question right there from UCF Easy. What do I think about Ryan Day not announcing the starting quarterback yet? Do I feel like he's holding out so one of them doesn't transfer out? I don't think that's it. I don't think that's why he's holding out. I think it's a bad look, quite frankly. I think it's a bad look, if I'm being quite honest with you. To come out and say that he basically, I mean, yes, utilize the power and the minds of your staff. That's why they're there. That's why you have a staff, is to kind of bounce ideas off of and to work together with them. But to come out and say we did a straw poll, we took a straw poll on who should be the quarterback, and it came out nearly 50-50. So between Devin Brown and Kyle McCord, we don't really know yet. I think the weak move. It looks like a weak move on Ryan Day's part. He's not confident in naming a starter himself. He's not confident in just coming out and saying, you know what, week one, we're riding with Kyle McCord. And guess what? If week one, they're going to beat Indiana. It doesn't matter who's starting. They're going to crush Indiana. So come out there, start McCord, start Devin Brown, whoever it is, let him play the first half. If things are going well, let the other guy play the second half. Whatever you need to do, and then make sure you have a main starter in place definitely before that Notre Dame game. And they will. They will. But Ohio State's got such an easy schedule right off the bat that, I feel like they have an opportunity to kind of play with the situation there. But I don't think they're gonna transfer out necessarily, because they still got that depth. If McCord or Brown gets hurt or they don't live up to the hype, they're going to need that guy there. So no one's transferring out yet. But I think it's a bad look on Ryan Day's part. And I think there is maybe a little bit of concern around the Ohio State program right now. They don't have that bona fide starter. They don't have that locked-in starter, and we are less than 2 weeks away from their opening game. So that is something that's interesting to watch out for. But great question. We're going to shed more light on that later on, but I like that comment, and something that I am a little concerned about, quite frankly. Again, shout out to Eugene Murphy. Jesus Christ Gaming. Hey, man, how's it going? Good things to come. Amen to that. Amen to that. I'm hoping so. Definitely hoping the channel continues to blow up, guys. We can't do it without the support from all of you here. So we, as always, do appreciate that. Paxton, yes, Navy Notre Dame was close last year. It was 35-13 at halftime. 35-13 at halftime. And then Navy battled back and made a 35-32 game, and Notre Dame ended up winning. But we should get that's going to be a fun game. That's going to be a fun game to open up the college football season. The 96 meeting, rivalry game in Ireland. That's going to be a fun game. We have our prediction for that game, analysis on that game coming out tomorrow right here on the channel, so don't miss out on that. Real quick, Alabama quarterback, more than likely going to be Jalen Milroe. SBO Kennels, correct on that, 100%. Believe it will be Jalen Milroe, but could be Ty. I don't think it's going to be Ty Simpson. I don't think it's going to be Tyler Buckner right now. I think Milroe gets to start in week one, but Alabama's in a not as similar position as Ohio State, because in week two, they've got Texas. So week one against Middle Tennessee, that's when they're going to have to really hit the ground, play all their different quarterbacks if that's what Nick Saban wants to do. And you've got to have a bona fide starter ready to go in week two against Texas. Texas certainly going to own that quarterback edge in week two, no doubt about it. But my gut says Milroe wins that starting job. But it has not been announced. Has not been announced yet. All right, let me shoot our guy a text real quick. Shoot Connor a text, tell him to join in. And we'll get him on here. We're going to talk. He's got a long list of stuff he wants to talk about, guys. And we're going to mix in your comments as well. We're going to talk surprise teams this year. He's got a couple of hot takes he wants to throw in there. So we're going to kind of sit here, discuss that, debate that a little bit, but also pull up some of your comments like we're doing here to discuss that. So we're really excited for it. And again, next week, next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time, we'll be back here with another live stream previewing week one, especially. And that'll be a call-in show for everybody. So we're really looking forward to that. Let's see. Who said I need a Boston College helmet? Was that Joker? I think it was. Or maybe he deleted it. I don't know. He goes, you need a BC helmet. I was like, bro, send me a BC helmet. We'd love to get. We've already bought a couple of our own that we're shipping out here soon. Hopefully, we'll get here soon. So we're contributing to the cause ourselves, but we love getting more from you guys, and because I think it means a little bit more that we get to represent your team and your gear in every video. Charter Nicholson, dude, what's up, man? Dude, I got to shoot you an email soon. Great to hear from you, my man. I need to leave the state. I really, really appreciate it. I really, really appreciate you and your support. I was reading some of the comments there, but Charter, good to hear from you. I'm going to be reaching out soon. We got a lot of talk. Good luck to us. Am I right? College football guy. Do I have bold predictions? I do. I do have some bold predictions for this year. I might sprinkle in a few tonight, mixed in with Connor's, but more than anything, I'll have those out for you next Tuesday. Next Tuesday will be my bold prediction. So I'll hook you up. I'll hook you up with that. Dennis Stokes, good to see you. Joker, thank you. Thank you. I'll be on the lookout, my man. The mailing address is in some of the previous video descriptions and right here on the channel. So go find that, ship it our way, and you'll get a major shout out and on display. So we'll keep an eye out. I appreciate it. All right, with this, Paxton, great segue, because we're going to be talking about them a lot today. With that, we're going to bring in our resident analyst here, and our man, College Football Encyclopedia, man, Connor Hibbett. He's a good friend of mine. He knows his ball. Let me tell you something. The guy knows what he's talking about. He's got a great Instagram page out there, CFE Grind, I believe, unless the name's changed, or CFE Encyclopedia. We're going to have him kind of plug that in here in a second. But so if you have Instagram, make sure you go give him a follow. But let's go ahead and welcome into the stream our man, Connor Hibbett. How's it going, Connor?
It's going great. Thank you for having me today. And yes, it still is CFE Grind. I'm still on the college football mentality grind.
I thought it was. We call you College Football Encyclopedia, but we got the grind in there. So I like the mix. But make sure to go give him a follow on Instagram if you're not already a follower of his already. Some great content over there. And like I said, dude knows his ball, and y'all are going to find out today as well. So Connor, real quick, just want to give an intro. We've kind of plugged your channel a little bit. Anything else you want to plug? Just kind of give us a little intro about yourself and how you know ball. Talk about your grind. Talk about everything like that, and then we'll kind of go into some of these topics that you and I had previewed earlier.
Well, I've always loved college football. It's my favorite sport by far. In the past, I've told people I'm a sports analyst, and they would say, "Oh, do you follow this sport and this sport?" I'm like, not really. It's college football, and then huge step back or drop downs, and then it's college basketball with March Madness, and then of course now that I'm part of the student section at UNT, and of course with North Texas success in basketball these last few years, I've had some good times in basketball too. But college football is by far my favorite sport, and I got into it, I would say, in 2011. My favorite teams, and I'll try my best not to be biased towards those, are in no particular order: UNT, LSU, and Texas. And that's kind of a wide discrepancy there for three favorite teams. But obviously UNT, because I attend the University of North Texas, and then Texas, University of Texas, because my dad went there. And then LSU, because I had two uncles who went to Louisiana State University, and most of my family's from Louisiana. So that's kind of where I originate with those three teams. But I was fortunate enough in 2011, my first year really watching college football, I should say it more in depth, watching the game, that I was really treated. It was a special treat that year with the 2011 LSU Fighting Tigers. And that's what really got me into that defensive mindset as well. I've always been more of a defense guy than an offense guy. I like those 9-6 games. Yes, I use that as an example for a reason. But that's what really got me into college football that season. And ever since then, I have every single year been steadily doing more in-depth research. And these last 6-7 years, I've been doing preseason analysis on all 100. And it used to be like 28 when I first started. Now it's 133 FBS teams. And it's going to be up to 134 next year. And we'll see what the near future brings. But that's kind of where we are now for me.
Heck of a background, man. One of the things I love hearing people's journey on how they got into college football. Some people are kind of grandfathered in from, like you're born into a family that loves the game or loves a certain team. So you just have to do it on your own, or, sometimes people branch out and find their own. It's always something that kind of triggers that love for the game. So yeah, heck of a story. And I like the broad range of teams. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with a wide range of teams to support. I'm the same way.
And the first college football game that I ever attended was in 2012. It was a season opener for LSU, and they were playing against UNT. And so and I think the first several games I attended in college football were for LSU games. And I think that's what kind of got me into that student section mindset. And now I work for a student section at UNT. So the atmosphere of college football is also what separates it from me. That's one of the reasons why it's also my favorite sport.
I like it. Well, Connor, let's go ahead and dive into it, man. I know you have put out some stuff on your channel or on your page on Instagram already, kind of teasing us with some of your insight and some of your picks for this season. But one of the things you and I talked about before the stream was you've got a couple teams, and like I said, we're trying to make it kind of concise because I know we've got about an hour and a half or so here. We have a lot to cover. A couple teams that maybe are flying under the radar that could surprise a little bit this year. I know you've got 3 or 4. So let's just hit us with your first one. It doesn't necessarily be your top one, but that first surprise team you're keeping your eye on.
Well, there are a couple of these teams, 2 of the 4 teams that I'm going to mention for breakthrough teams, so to speak, are not really going to shock a ton of people because they've been discussed a little bit. The other 2 have not been discussed as much. So let's talk about the 2 that have been discussed. Let's start off with a team that's from my own state, the state that I was born in, the state of Texas, but not the Texas Longhorns, although I do think they'll be pretty good this year. Let's go with the Texas Tech Red Raiders. This is a senior-laden team this year. Needless to say, this is not going to be close to the same team in a year from now. So this is a window of opportunity for them. We'll see if they take full advantage of it. Interestingly enough, a year ago, I was saying, Tech, I don't know about Tech. I think they're probably going to be a 5-7, 6-6 kind of team. And then a year later, I'm like, this team has an outside chance to win the Big 12 championship. Now, this is also kind of a high variance team. They played in a lot of close games last year. We're 4-0 in one-score games, including 3 overtime victories, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So a little bit of a high variance team. They also go for it on 4th down, the second most, at least last year, the second most in the country behind only Lane Kiffin, and no one's really ever going to eclipse that guy with 4th down attempts. But Texas Tech, the game that really sticks out to me with those 4th down attempts was against the Longhorns. I believe they attempted on 7 times on 4th down, but they were certainly a fun team to watch last year because of their high variance and, a little bit of high scoring games. So people were taking the overs and maybe cashing that in. But, I'm a little different in terms of I like those lower scoring games, the 17-14 kind of games. But I know that they probably increase their viewership because of their style of play. They're a fun team. But I'll tell you what, Alex, this is the first year that I've been doing preseason analysis, and I've been doing it since 2018. That I actually think Texas Tech can have a legit defense. And I don't want to say elite. That's a high bar, but legit. So difference makers. They can be the difference in those wins and losses rather than having to win games 45-38. And I will start with what's going to be creating a lot of havoc this year with the Texas Tech defensive line. I'm really high on these dudes. So they bring back both of their 5th-year seniors at defensive tackle. And I think one of the guys was a preseason All Big 12 first teamer when the preseason polls came out and all that. But I'm really liking their defensive ends, and the coaching staff loves the defensive ends. Miles Cole's a guy that I think is going to totally break through. 6'6", 285, and he can move. He's a little scary to go up against. And then opposite him will be a transfer from Syracuse and Steve Linton. Not as big. He's about 235. Maybe he's about 240 now. He's about 6'4", but he's very explosive. And limited time last year, he had about 4 sacks for Syracuse, and I think that number will probably double this year. I think he can get close to double-digit sacks, but Miles Cole, I think, will also get several sacks. But those 2 guys, the coaching staff is really high on, and they think both will be selected in next year's NFL draft.
Yeah, I like the point you made there. Texas Tech kind of perennially has had that offense, right? I mean, you go back to even the Cliff Kingsbury days. I mean, the offense was always phenomenal. Last year was great, and you run under Joey McGuire. This year, I mean, they practically returned everybody on the
Yeah.
offensive side of the ball. So, and that's phenomenal. I mean, you and I differ in that range. I'm definitely more of an offensive guy. I love high scoring games. I love the fast paced offenses. That's just my style. So, but you do. I mean, as a fan of the game, period, you do at times have to respect those lower scoring games. You have to respect those 9-6 games, those 17-14 games, and the work that goes in, into the defenses. I go back to that. Keep touching on Texas Tech, but that Super Bowl a few years ago, Patriots and Rams, 13-6.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of people across the country were like, "Oh God, that was a miserable Super Bowl." But honestly, if you really study the game, you realize that was actually a really good game, a really fun game to watch. So just depends on your style. Pick your poison. But I agree. I think it's one of those things in the Big 12 where, for years it's been, can any of these teams put it all together? We know, some teams have great offenses but horrible defenses, and vice versa. What team can put it together and have a top 50, top 30, whatever it is, of both? And maybe Texas Tech has an opportunity to do that.
I 100% believe they will. The one thing I do not love about their defense, I'll get to their offense here in a second, which should be very explosive this year, and but we'll get to the offense here in a second. But the thing that scares me the most about the defense, in broad terms, the secondary, but more specifically the speed of the secondary. Mm-hmm. So for me, with Texas Tech last year, if you were to look up their secondary stats, they gave up explosive plays. And that was because of one reason and one reason only. They weren't that fast. And that's not really going to change a ton this year. But one guy that's coming back from injury this year that I think will help out at least with not giving up as many explosive plays is Tyler Owens. He's a safety for Texas Tech. This was actually a guy that Bruce Feldman, who writes for The Athletic, he put out that list of like athletic freaks for this year. I think there's like 100 guys on that list. Texas Tech had 3 defensive players on that list. So for those who are listening to me discuss this Texas Tech defense, they're like, what is this guy talking about? They've never been that good. Well, I'm letting you know they're going to be better this year than what you probably think. So Tyler Owens at safety is a guy to watch. But I also like their corners. You got Malik Dunlap on one side. They're not that fast, but they are big and they're physical, and they do a good job of playing the ball in the air without having pass interference called on them. And I think that will only improve this year. This is a super senior laden team, and it's a super senior laden secondary. I just think they're going to put it all together this year, at least to be legit. And for Texas Tech to be difference makers on defense, it's not a high bar to clear for them, but I think they're going to be noticeably better on defense.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that. McGuire has done a phenomenal job on the recruiting trail. The amount of people that are coming back to, I think, what people fail to recognize. And recruiting trail, I don't just mean high schoolers either. I mean, obviously from the transfer portal as well. So yeah, I mean, I think Tech, if you look at their schedule, and I want to get your take on this one game, then we'll need to move on to the next team. We got our college football guy here. Makes a great point that underrated non-conference game in week 2 that I think is kind of getting not enough attention because of all the other massive week 2 games, such as the Alabama-Texas game, kind of stealing that spotlight. This is a game that's going to be really, really good in Lubbock. That he's right. If Texas Tech beats Oregon, the Tyler Shug reunion game also, they'll probably propel themselves, I would imagine, into the top 10, or at least very close to it, since the AP snubbed them from being ranked. Yeah. And has an opportunity to, I mean, we've heard about them all year long, of course, the Texas Tech, but this would be an opportunity for everybody across the country to recognize that they're the real deal. And
one matchup in this game that I'm very intrigued by is this Texas Tech defensive line against a new-look Oregon offensive line. And whenever you have a position group that's new, it doesn't mean it's going to be bad. But when you do have a lot of new, there are questions to be answered. Again, just because you have questions doesn't mean things are not going to gel for that season. But usually if things gel, and that's still an if, it doesn't mean it will. But if it does, it typically takes a few games or a handful of games before it does. It's hardly a big question, like Oregon's offensive line is usually not settled in the first few weeks of the season. So Texas Tech has an opportunity, especially in Lubbock. You get that crowd getting into the game. Of course, we know the kind of atmosphere that Lubbock is. They get that crowd into the game. I think Texas Tech's defense is actually going to be better than Oregon's this year. And Oregon's defense wasn't anything great last year. I just think Tech has the pieces in place to kind of peak. this year, if you will, defensively. And it may not be sustainable, but their defensive coordinator, I believe it's Tim DeRuyter, he usually gets the most out of his defense. And over these last couple of years, he's been really good at developing pass rushers. So again, I look at that Texas Tech defensive front. I think they're going to create havoc here. And I'm not sure if you're really wanting to give any individual game picks here or anything like that. But I think this is a very intriguing matchup, and I would not be shocked to see Texas Tech actually win this game. Based on the ranking of these teams in this game, it's going to be viewed as a huge upset. But the spread's only like 3.5 for Oregon right now. But I've got my eyes on this one. In fact, Alex, for those of you watching this video, my college football page is CFE Grind. Next week, before week 1, I'm going to post about potential September surprises. So the kind of games that put teams on the map, and from that point forward, it's like, maybe that wasn't really an upset. Maybe that team is really legit. Those kind of matchups. We always see those in September. I think this could be one of them where it puts Texas Tech on the map early for this year.
I like it. Fully agree. So, I mean, just go ahead. Is your pick Texas Tech? If you had to pick right now, would you pick Texas Tech to win that game? Yeah, I assume so. I like it.
Yeah, and if I had to pick the score, again, I want to make it clear. I don't think Tech's going to have an elite defense, but one that makes differences in the game that we haven't really seen for them. Maybe, well, at least our generation hasn't seen maybe ever. So I'm going to say 34-31 Texas Tech. The difference will be Texas Tech defense creates maybe a few negative plays, maybe a few sacks, maybe they create a couple of turnovers, create that havoc, and that'll be the difference.
I like it. Bold pick early on, but again, maybe not so bold a couple of weeks after that game. Connor, here's with that second surprise team that's kind of been on your mind.
All right, so now we'll go to a team that I actually think will surprise people. We'll transition between teams that are getting discussed and teams that are not getting that attention as much. So let's go with a team that I think will actually shock people this year, and that's the Missouri Tigers. This team, you want to talk about defense? Here I go again with defense, guys. You want to talk about a defense? This team has it. Now, there is a very specific stat that I like to look at for top defenses, and that's DFEI. Now, I said that my family's from Louisiana, and this word looks French, but I can't pronounce it. It's FREMEAUX. Maybe it's Fremo. I don't know. But that's what – so DFEI stands for defense, that word, Fremo, efficiency index. So basically what that stat is, it tells you how good a defense is. Alex, how many times do we see – and all due respect to them, the military schools are usually in the top 15, top 20 in defense? It's because they're hardly ever on the field. Now, they do a good job of playing in a phone booth, getting those third down stops. If you talk to military school coaches, they'll tell you how crucial it is for their defense to get off the field on third downs because they really focus on that. They pinpoint that as a point of emphasis because their style of play. But if you were to look at the top 10 defenses according to DFEI by the season, if you go back to 2015, one defense that's never talked about, but they were legit that year, was Boston College. But they were always on the field. But they got so many stops. In fact, I think Boston College lost a game that season like 3-0 to Wake Forest, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they did. Yes.
But 2016, a team that didn't have a tremendous record, but had a tremendous defense. Just ask a team that almost ended up winning the national championship. And that was LSU. But they had 4 losses, and 3 of those 4, or actually in all 4 of those losses, they gave up a combined 3 touchdowns. We're talking across 4 games here. So basically where I'm going with this is that I think Missouri will have a top 10 defense with DFEI. And they might even be top 10 in some other stats as well. But their record may not be tremendous this year because of their difficulty of their schedule. But this is nonetheless a team that I think is going to compete in every single one of their games, and that includes a road game in Athens, because you know who gave Georgia their best regular season game last year? The Missouri Tigers did. And they have the defense to be competitive in every single matchup. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this defense competes. They got 9 senior starters, and I'm going to tell you this right now, Alex, I think they've got at least 4 NFL draft picks next April, maybe even more, just on defense.
Yeah, the defense was obviously phenomenal last year. Returned practically everybody, almost everybody on that side of the ball. And I like what you said about Missouri as well. And we addressed this in our Missouri prediction video, and we've talked about it throughout this offseason. I think you did as well. This is a team that, yes, gave Georgia one of, if not their toughest test of the entire year. I think that the two teams that really challenged Georgia last year were Missouri and Ohio State, if we're really thinking about it. And you also go back and look at Missouri, obviously a team that was a lot better than their final record showed. You had that game they should have won against Auburn. They should have beat Auburn. You don't fumble in the end zone, kind of a boneheaded play there, and you win that game. They should have beat Georgia, if we're being honest there. They should have probably beat Kentucky.
Yes.
They played Kentucky. That was a really almost feel like Missouri got robbed there with that roughing the punter call. So, they had like three of five, I can't remember the exact number, one possession games that Missouri was very, very close to winning, probably should have won. Now you've got a team now full with a lot more experienced players, veteran players from that team from last year. Defense just as good, if not better. New offensive coordinator that could, in theory, improve that passing attack if they can all stay healthy. Favorable schedule, all things considered. I mean, I think I'm not necessarily picking it, but this is a team that has an opportunity to be undefeated going into that second week of October.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yes.
I think, well, here I go again with another September surprise here. I think Missouri is going to beat Kansas State this year, and I actually feel pretty confident about that. I think they're the much better team. Now, it may not show on the scoreboard because you know what? Kansas State's coaches are going to find a way to make that game closer than maybe what it should be, and the Missouri guys, the Missouri team right now, the way I feel about Missouri is that they're going to build some confidence, and that'll help them as the season wears along. But early in the season, I think Missouri knows what they're capable of. But to me, it's almost like Nebraska. They have to prove it to themselves. It's like a mental block. And so what I think will happen actually in that Kansas State game, I think Missouri will actually jump on them pretty quick, maybe like a 10-0 lead, and then K-State will fight back. And then it's like, Missouri, can you find a way to win a close game? And I think they will find a way to win a close game in a game that they probably should, in my opinion, win by 7 to 10 points based on how I think they match up against them. And but either way, I think Missouri will actually find a way to win that game. And that'll help them build some momentum for that first 5 games or so. The problem is the back half of the Missouri schedule is a gauntlet. They have to play LSU. They draw LSU from the West Division. And then they have to play at Kentucky right after the LSU game. And then I believe that it's like South Carolina at home. It's like a bye week at Georgia. And they still have to play Tennessee, although they will get Tennessee in Columbia. They'll get Florida in Columbia. And then they'll have to finish up the season at Arkansas. I will say, though, they do have Arkansas's number here these last few years, so we'll see about that. And I do have my questions about Arkansas this year. To me, this will be like the first year where I look at Sam Pittman and say, okay, Sam, this is kind of more your team, so let's see what you can do with it. Although KJ, he's legit. Rocket Sanders is legit. But outside of those two guys, I've got a lot of questions. I like the depth for Arkansas's defensive line, but I'm going on a tangent here on Arkansas. And I know you're a huge fan of Arkansas. That's kind of why I did that. But
yeah, I could, you're going to get me off on a tangent. I mean, I'll give you the quick hitter, and then we'll move on to your next team. First, I agree with you. I also picked Missouri to beat Kansas State. Predicted that a couple months ago, so we're on the same page there. I fully agree. Second with Arkansas, yes, it's one of those things. Look, Arkansas. Look, and I don't know if we got any Arkansas fans in the chat if they're going to watch this later. Look, I can say this guy, I'm a fan. Arkansas is consistently destined to fail, if we're just being completely honest. It's just how it is. If you're an Arkansas fan, you've watched them, you know how it's going to go. And what's happened the last 2 years? Think about it. What's happened the last 2 years with Arkansas? They've gotten off to a fast start, risen to the top 10, and then tanked. And I guarantee that's exactly what's going to happen this year. They're going to start 3-0. At least they should. They'll be top 25, not top 10. But then that 4-game gauntlet of LSU, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Bama in 4 straight weeks, none of which are in Fayetteville, they're going to lose every single one of those. They'll be lucky if they can win one. And honestly, the most likely win there is probably against A&M in Arlington because the other 3 are true road games. So, Arkansas they're not going to eclipse 8 wins. I would be floored if they eclipsed 8 wins. I've got them at 7-5. I think that would be a successful season, all things considered. But it's just kind of what they do. Arkansas never finds a way to live up to the expectations. Have a feeling they'll probably fall short again this year. But again, it is Sam Pittman's team. This is his opportunity to do something about it. There's no, this was Chad Morris's mess. This was, whatever it is. Again, I could continue to go on this tangent too. Maybe I'll save that for next week. But Connor, hit us with a third surprise team, and then take your pick, Brett. I know we're going to spend a lot of time on those hot takes and surprising pass. So let's make this your last one, if you don't mind.
All right, real quick though on Missouri, watch out for Luther Burden at receiver this year. He's going to be in the slot position, which is his preferred position. And Missouri's offense features that slot position a lot, and he's going to have that freshman and sophomore leap. This is a guy that I think if Missouri has a special season, So they find a way to win those competitive games. I think he has an outside chance actually at the Bolitnikov.
Wow, bold statement on Luther. But I mean, I agree. He was a flash. I mean, he was a pretty big playmaker last year. And we also have to remember too, he's not just a great wide receiver, but dangerous on special teams as well.
Yeah, and now you've got, I think Brady Cook will be the guy at some point. He had a torn labor in his shoulder like the whole season last year. That's partially why Missouri offensively kind of fell off the map last year. So I think this Missouri team is going to surprise some people this year. So that'll transition into a team that I'm so excited for this year. It kind of feels like one last ride for them, and that's the Oregon State Beavers. I cannot wait to watch this team. This team has got, in my opinion, the best collection of offense and defensive lines in the entire Pac-12. That's better than Utah, better than USC, better than UCLA, Oregon, Washington, you name it. I think this team has the best line of scrimmage in their conference this year. And if you look at their schedule, and I don't want to give too much away because we're going to discuss this with the paths coming up, but I like the way their schedule shapes up for them. I like the offensive line for Oregon State a ton. I think this is one of the 3 best offensive lines in the country this year. I understand you got Georgia, you got Michigan. I understand that. That's a great argument. But I think this team is kind of best of the rest, and they're elite. I think they're going to have 3, maybe even 4 NFL draft picks next April if the guys decide to leave after their 3rd or 4th years. They're redshirt juniors this year, a lot of them, so we'll see if they decide to take that NFL leap next April. But I like the offense because they bring in DJ Uiagalelei. Now, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to say DJ Uiagalelei for Heisman, but this guy's an upgraded quarterback from last year. And Oregon State won 10 games last year with subpar quarterback play. So that's the way I'll phrase that. He's an upgrade. I like the receivers a little bit more than the average preview magazine does. Now, they're not that big, but Anthony Gould and Silas Bolden are very fast, very explosive. And the way Oregon State's offense is going to be this year, they're going to be very efficient. They're going to be able to run the football very well because of the schedule and how it shapes out. And I'll discuss that here in a few minutes with you, Alex. But the receivers are going to be just enough for their system to do kind of overachieve, if you will. And I like the tight end room. It's very deep. The running back room is deep. I like this offense. And defensively, they may not be as good as they were last year, but this defensive line for Oregon State is going to be the best it's been in over a decade. The linebackers don't have the experience they did last year or the depth, but they're more talented this year. They're faster than they were last year. And in the secondary, if they can stay healthy, that's going to be the key for them. They lost a lot of depth, but if they can stay healthy, I love the starters, especially at safety. They got an underrated safety group. You look at, by the way, Alton Julian should be back this year. He used to be their best defensive back a couple years ago. You got Ryan Cooper at nickel. And then you got I'm forgetting who's a 6-year senior at free safety. Kitano Ladapo.
I'm blanking on it too.
Kitano Ladapo.
Yes.
He is a special talent. And Cooper, Julian, and they got Akili Arnold for a depth piece. They've got a really good safety group that's completely overlooked because all the preview magazines are going to tell you, oh, they lost 3 of their top 5 defensive backs. They're gonna fall off the map in their secondary this year. If they can stay healthy, which I know is kind of key for a lot of teams, but if the corners can stay healthy, oh my gosh, this team is going to be great defensively.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, right? I mean, when the last few years under Jonathan Smith, I don't think anybody has viewed Oregon State as a strong offensive team. They have won games behind the strength of their defense. This year is kind of like we mentioned with Texas Tech, could be the year that Oregon State kind of puts it all together. The defense is going to be insanely strong per usual, but the offense now could finally take that next step. I agree. A lot of people are going to try to dog on DJ Uiagalelei. They're going to point fingers at what he did at Clemson, which wasn't great. Although I will say last year was a better year for him than 2021 was. Did he ultimately get benched a handful of times, like in the game against Syracuse, ACC championship games like that? Yeah, he did. But compared to 2021, he was a lot better. Took that next step. And sometimes that's all you need is kind of that fresh start, a new system, and a new system that I don't think is going to rely as heavily on him as well. Because if you look at Oregon State's running back core, and obviously a team that wants to run the ball, especially run the ball well behind that strong offensive line, that's going to take pressure off of him. I think it's going to take pressure off of DJ to where it's not going to have to be winning games solely through the air, maybe like he was sometimes expected to do during his time at Clemson. So the pieces have been together for Oregon State. As you mentioned, the schedule kind of lines up well for that. And you know what, Carter, why don't we just stay on that? Why don't we kind of segue maybe into those surprising paths, as you mentioned, and carry over that Oregon State topic.
So over the last, I've been doing preseason analysis with all FBS teams and all these games, individual games, since 2018. The most manageable path for average to better than average Power 5 team was in 2019, and that team was the Minnesota Golden Gophers. I still have not seen a path to set up a team since then, like what they had that year. I mean, they had like 8 layups to begin the season, and then they won a bunch of one-score games. So Minnesota wasn't a great team to start off with, but they got those manageable games. They got better as a team, and then they got Penn State at home, a team that you need to play at home if you're in Minnesota to really have a fighting chance. And what happened? They did just enough. They forced an interception there late in the game, and they found a way to pull off a close one at home. And the next thing you know it, they're 9-0, and they've only played really a couple teams with a pulse. Well, I haven't seen anything like that kind of schedule to that degree, but this is the closest thing that I've seen to it with Oregon State this year. I don't have the power ratings pulled up with me right now, but if you were to pull up power ratings for all the teams in the country, but we'll talk specifically Power 5. Do you know how many manageable teams, based in respect to what their power rating is? If I'm not mistaken, I think Oregon State 24th in power ratings. They play a ton of Power 5 teams that are power rated or they play a lot of Power 5 teams that are power rated like low 40s below. A lot of teams like in the 50s, even higher 60s, like Arizona. But if you were to look at the first 10 games for Oregon State, they play at San Jose State. And if I'm not mistaken, Alex, I know you go through these depth charts too. What is San Jose State's biggest question mark on defense this year?
It's going to be up front for sure.
Yep. 100%. Then they'll play UC Davis. They're going to be a little undersized, and all due respect, that's a game that Oregon State is going to need to win. That's about a 99% chance to win. San Diego State. Alex, what is San Diego State's biggest question mark on defense this year?
I feel like it's going to be a mix of almost everything, but also up front.
Yep. All right, so then they go to Washington State. Alex, I'm going to ask you again, what is Washington State's biggest question mark on defense?
Up front, defensive line, baby.
All right, so then they go home and they play Utah. So key word there, home. They go to home and play Utah. It'll be a Friday night. If I'm not mistaken, a lot of upsets happen on those weeknight games, especially for the home teams. And then they'll play at Cal. What has been Cal's biggest issue on defense these last couple of years?
Yeah, it's been up front. And Wilcox has always been known for solid secondaries, but hasn't been able to do anything in the front seven.
Exactly. And if I'm not mistaken, I think over like the last half of the Pac-12 schedule for Cal last year, they only had a few sacks.
Yeah, no, they were one of the worst in terms of creating pressure in the Pac-12 for sure.
And then they get, then they're at home. There's a key word there, home, against UCLA, who's got a lot of question marks on offense this year. Although I will say a non-question for UCLA, at least you would look on paper, is their front seven on defense. It actually looks pretty good. So, but the offense for UCLA will have a lot of question marks. And again, they got to go to Corvallis. Then Oregon State will get a bye week. And then it's at Arizona. Arizona's biggest question on their whole entire team is their defense, but more specifically, the talent on their defensive line. And then they go to Colorado. Alex, I think you and I and everyone knows this, but the biggest question mark for Colorado is the line of scrimmage. And then they go home to play Stanford, and that's a really good spot there because if you're playing back-to-back road games against Arizona and Colorado, who could be maybe sneaky good offensively this year, Arizona will be good offensively. You need those games where it's like there's no look-ahead spot, potential trip up. I like the way that's 10 games that I just talked about there, and then they finish up the season with Washington at home again, and then they go to Oregon. So if you paid attention there when I mentioned the home and away games, 3 of by far the 4 most challenging games are going to be in Corvallis. And then for those of you who may not be paying attention to Oregon State these last couple of years, Oregon State has won 12 of their last 13 home games, and they have covered ATS against the spread in their last 13 games in Corvallis. And little fun fact for you, that stadium, Reser Stadium, is going to be bigger this year. They just added on to it this past summer. I don't know why more people are not talking about this path for Oregon State. This is a team that could potentially start at worst 8-2 and at best 10-0.
Yeah, I'll say, I think a lot of people are avoiding Oregon State, overlooking Oregon State, obviously because of the depth of the Pac-12. Right now, the strength, you're talking about USC, a true playoff contender with Caleb Williams, Washington with Michael Penix, Oregon with Bo Nix, Utah even, who's won the last two Pac-12. So Oregon State, unfortunately, has been buried underneath these teams that have made, quote-unquote, bigger splashes in the conference, or at least on the national stage these last few years. Oregon State last year was great, won 10 games. What did they do to contribute to the national stage other than pulling off that massive upset over Oregon, which led to them missing out on the Pac-12 championship, things like that? They really haven't. But I agree with you in that sense. Both sides of the ball are solid. The schedule, you and I talked about all offseason, is extremely favorable, and those home games are key. The toughest road game they truly have is that season finale at Oregon. Washington State, Pullman's not easy, but they could manage a win there. You look at it across the board, too, with Oregon State. The thing that I think is really interesting is, they manage their home games. They don't slip up on the road there. They're 10-0 heading into the last two games against Washington and Oregon. First off, Washington, they probably should have beat Washington last year, and that was in Seattle.
Yeah.
So that should if you're an Oregon State fan, that should give you some faith, saying, hey, it's senior day for us in our renovated new stadium against a team that we easily could have beat last year. That's number one. But one thing I'm interested to see what happens with Oregon State is the strength of schedule is so favorable for them, but it's also so weak for them. And so you can't help but wonder, could we be in another situation if they get off that quick 10-0 start, whatever? Could we be in another situation of the Minnesota team you mentioned, or like the 2017 Wisconsin team that was undefeated going into their conference championship game, but wasn't getting respect from the playoff committee because of how weak their opponents were?
That's exactly what we would see. And also something else, as we're seeing right now off the field with conference realignment, guess what Oregon State doesn't have with schools like with USC and Oregon? They don't have the brand.
Right.
So
exactly.
They're not going to get they're not going to see how would Reese Davis put it? If you're splitting hairs between teams, there's a early take on what Reese Davis is going to say for November with the college football playoff rankings. But when they're all talking about splitting hairs between teams, the committee members they're going to find an argument or a reason to give for their rankings, but a lot of it has to do with the brand and how they can rank teams to help out the teams who are like higher in the rankings. So, for example, if they're splitting hairs between Alabama and USC or something, or how about a school with the brand versus no brand? How about Alabama against Oregon State, let's say? Alabama is going to get that nod because for two reasons. One, they have the brand, but two, guess what they're going to do, as you mentioned, with that schedule for Oregon State? They're going to say, and it's true, they don't have that strength of schedule like the Alabama's going to have in the SEC West, but what's also going to happen is if you have like an 8-4 SEC West team that may not deserve to be ranked, they're going to be ranked to help out that team who's ranked 5th or 6th, and they need to bump them up in the rankings and say, well, this team that's ranked 5th or 6th has one more ranked win than the team who's currently ranked above them. So that's why we changed the rankings here and flip-flopped them, because in this example, Alabama has one more ranked win than Oregon State has, or whatever that argument may be. They're going to make that up. They're going to fix the rankings there to fit their narrative.
Right. No, and that's typically how it goes, right? Unfortunately, we've seen it time and time. It's already kind of how it's been now, even with the Associated Press, right? I still feel that way. It's let's put in the big name teams into the rankings for a lot of different. And I want to continue that thought. I want to give a shout out before it goes away to our man Louise. Man, thank you, man. Thank you so much for the super chat. Super chat's always on. Every bit of it, we try to funnel right back into the channel, whether it's more equipment, helmets, stuff in our background. So it goes a long way, and we're going to display it every time. So, Louis, thank you so much. And go Noles, baby. You and our man Mike Myrick, we always support the Noles here. So thank you so much. And the whiteboard certainly not going anywhere anytime soon. I can promise you that. Definitely was a simpler time. I miss it. But to continue your point, Connor, I agree with you on what you said. We've seen that now with the AP. A team like Texas A&M, in my opinion, should not have started the season ranked in the preseason top 25. I think that was ridiculous.
They put the wrong Texas team in there.
Right? Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So there's no Tech in there and not A&M. It was ridiculous. But why do they do that? Well, I mean, it's for for the brand. It's for the sake of the brand. It's for the sake of also, I think a lot of times they do that to manipulate it for other teams, but also for eye candy. It's, you take a look at, like, I can give a great example. Last year, when Texas A&M lost to App State, they kept them in the rankings on the low end, right? Like 23 Texas A&M. Why? Because their game in week 3 was against Miami, who hadn't lost Middle Tennessee yet, so it was still a top 25 team. Right. So that made it look a lot better. When ESPN's flashing those advertisements across TV, they want to see 2 numbers by their name. They don't want nothing.
Right.
It's all about the brand. It's about the name brand, and it's unfortunate that we're not just dealing with this with integrity. The guys who make up the rankings, both AP and college football playoff, they don't know ball. It's a money grab. They don't watch the games. You've got guys on the playoff committee saying, like the guy who snubbed Christian McCaffrey. I'll be honest with you, man. I didn't watch any of your games because I'm on the East Coast and you play on the West Coast. I can't watch your games, so I'm not going to vote for you. Guys on the playoff committee that go, well, I don't know if Washington's any good because they play at 10 o'clock Pacific time, and that's super late for me out west. It doesn't make sense. And those are the type of people that unfortunately are making these executive decisions when it comes to rankings and things like and bowl game selection, things like that. If you put people in there that actually knew ball, that watched all the games like we do and other analysts on TV actually do, I think the world would be a much better place. College football would be a much better place. But unfortunately, that's not how it goes.
How dare they disrespect Pac-12 after dark?
Right. Yes. That's the best way to conclude the day. You get up early, you watch game day, you stay up till 2 a.m. watching Pac-12 after the dark. There's no better way to spend a Saturday. I've
got tons of headaches when I wake up on Sunday, and that's not from any kind of hangovers. That's because I've been so stressed from Saturday games.
Right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, I got God said Sunday's a day of rest, right? That's what I said, right? Take that day off, because God knows we all need it. So
yeah.
All right, I want to get your next take there. We hit on Oregon State. I know you talked with me 2 other kind of surprising paths to talk about. Hit us with one of them. So
you were bringing up Oregon State may or may not get that respect. Well, they won't get the respect they deserve later in the season because of that strength of schedule. And I get it. So you could be looking at kind of like what Minnesota was, kind of a hollow 11-win team back in 2019. You could be looking at a hollow double-digit win team for Oregon State this year. Another potential hollow double-digit win team this season would be the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, this is a team that finished with a losing record for the first time since 1999, I want to say, this past year. Crazy. Yeah. But 5 of their 7 losses were by 1 score. Now, I don't want to use like 2021 Nebraska terminology here, but that's probably going to turn around here. And I don't, knock on wood, right? I'm going to jinx this probably, but I think Oklahoma is going to turn things around in a pretty big way this year for a couple of reasons. One, if you were to repeat last year, Oklahoma is probably an 8 or 9 win team. But with this year's schedule, it is so manageable. And if I remember it off the top of my head, they should be undefeated in the non-conference. I mean, their toughest game in the non-conference will be at home against SMU. And I believe they're like a 2-touchdown favorite. They may or may not cover. We'll see, but they should win. And then their conference schedule is also extremely beneficial. Now, Alex, I'm going to ask you a question. These last few years, we've seen a couple of teams. They seem to have Oklahoma's number. Who are those teams?
Oklahoma's number? Baylor and Kansas State.
Yep. And then that super senior laden team of Texas Tech we just were talking about several minutes ago. Yep. Baylor and Kansas State, Texas Tech. Oklahoma avoids all 3 of those teams this year. I don't know why more people are not talking about this. And then the tough teams on their schedule, like if you weren't to look at the locations of their games, if you were just to look at their conference games, I bet one would argue, in hindsight, after mentioning those tougher conference games, then going back and looking at the locations of those games, they would realize most of Oklahoma's most difficult games this year will be in Norman. And their most difficult games are not that challenging this year. Now, this is an Oklahoma team with a ton of questions. This is the first year going into a season where I'm like, can you name me an Oklahoma receiver?
Currently, no.
No.
They can't.
Yeah, I mean, I think Drake Stoops, is on the roster, and he's proven but they don't really have, at least in my opinion, as of right now. I'm sure someone will break through. It's Oklahoma. They're probably going to be fine. But this is the first year I'm going into a season where I'm like, who's Oklahoma's top receiver going to be? Like, do they have any first or second team all Big 12 guys here? Maybe a second team. I don't see a first team. Certainly not any All-Americans. And that's the first time for me as well. So they've got their questions. By the way, the defensive line, well, I think they could be good at rushing the passer this year. I think they're going to be fine at defensive end. They're a little undersized, and as of right now, they seem to lack a little bit of quality at the interior of their defensive line. And the corners are going to be young this year. Now, just because they're young doesn't mean they're going to be bad, but they are a question, and that's kind of where I started this off with Oklahoma's roster. They had got their fair share of questions, and will they all be answered? I doubt it. I mean, from what we saw last year, which was actually, in my opinion, a better roster, they didn't perform. But this year's schedule provides an opportunity for them to totally turn things around. And again, like I said, if you were to repeat last year, same scenarios, everything's the same, even the same weather, same injuries, all that, they probably are like an 8 or a 9 win team. And now with this year's schedule, it's kind of hard for me not to think that Oklahoma, worst case scenario, again, unless there's like this unforeseen injury, to me, this is at least a 9-win team with this schedule. And that's if they disappoint. To me, this could easily be a 10-2 team. They're by far their most difficult games against Texas. That's a rivalry. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the sayings of college football is anything can happen in a rivalry game. But if we were to assume a loss to the Longhorns, who else are they going to lose to? I mean, maybe to Oklahoma State, but Oklahoma State, what are they going to be this year? I know they've got a manageable schedule as well, which I find interesting for both the Oklahoma schools to have two of the most easy schedules in the Big 12 this year. But, I mean, what are they going to be? You know, the Cover 3 podcast, you know, we're doing their win totals, and they were talking about Oklahoma State. But one of the things they were talking about with them was that what their opponents were not, rather than what Oklahoma State is. So what is Oklahoma State? We don't know. What is Kansas going to be defensively this year? We don't know. And yeah, those are probably, after the Texas game, probably the next two. And then, of course, the TCU game at home. Then again, another challenging game at home that Oklahoma gets in Norman. What is their next most challenging game after Texas?
Right. There's not. And that's the thing. I mean, you can argue what happens. I mean, you got TCU towards the end of the year, maybe.
Yeah.
That. I mean, it's not that bad. And that's kind of been the big storyline, right? Anybody that, it's really funny because a lot of times people look at this and they go, how are you going to say a team goes from 6-7 to double-digit wins in a span of 1 year? I mean, especially with a lot of the same guys coming back. And you say, there's obviously a lot of factors that go into that. Last year was a tough year for Oklahoma. Was it disappointing? Yes. I think a lot of people thought they were going to come in there and maybe make the playoff or contend for a Big 12 title. But people forget, it was year one under Brent Venables. So you're coming in with a new coach and a new scheme, a guy who, by the way, had never been a head coach before as well. Dealt with an injury early on to Dylan Gabriel. Now that he didn't miss much time, but you know, and some would say it wasn't going to play that big a role. And you're right, TCU was going to win whether Gabriel was healthy or not. Texas, I think, was going to win that game whether Gabriel was fully healthy or not. It didn't really matter. But regardless, I like what you said. You replayed last year's season, the way it went down, especially with those 5-1 possession losses. And I don't think Oklahoma loses all of them again.
No.
You know, they win a few more. And like you said, you win 3 of those, you've got a 9-win season. One of those losses was in the bowl game to a good Florida State team. So this was a team that obviously, kind of mentioning it with, I think it may have been Texas Tech or Oregon State, whoever we were talking about recently, Missouri is who it was. Obviously a team that was a lot better than that final record indicated. Missouri and Oklahoma also both finished 6-7 last year. So talk about teams that could kind of rise from the ashes of a losing record in 2022 to a top team in their conference in 2023. Both those teams are prime examples. Yeah.
So Oklahoma was a penalty away from being up 21-3, I believe, early in the second quarter against Florida State.
Yeah.
Who are we hyping up to make the playoff this year? Aren't a lot of people hyping up Florida State? And then everyone's overlooking Oklahoma, just like, they're a 7-5, 8-4 team. With that schedule, if they are, then I tell you what, I'll admit my wrongdoing here, this bad take, this ice cold take that I got for Oklahoma, and say, okay, you know what? I'll bow down to them and say, you know what? You were right, and I was wrong about Oklahoma. I'm not going to trust Brent Venables from this point moving forward, because if you look at their 2024 SEC schedule, oh my goodness, it's like the exact opposite end of the spectrum from this year's Big 12 schedule. Also, like, I don't know like how this all happened, but to me, there's like a lot of like situational stuff here that this all happened to be in 1 year. By far, in a way, the best roster in the Big 12 this year is Texas. Now, whether or not they live up to that talent, we'll see. But they're the odds-on favorite, and it's not even close to win the Big 12 this year. Now, for those, I'm going on a tangent here real quick, Alex, but for those that are saying that, hey, we've seen Texas receive the hype here, that they've never lived up to the hype. Okay, so Texas was preseason number 1 in the media poll for the Big 12 this year. Do you know the last time Texas has been number 1 in the preseason Big 12 media poll?
Can't tell you.
2009. That's the last time they were actually number 1 in the preseason Big 12 media poll. What did they do that year? They lived up to that, although by a last second field goal to Nebraska. But you know what? They're potentially a quarterback injury away from winning a national championship.
Right.
So for those that are using that saying that everyone says and it's over, now it's just oversaid now, and they're like, oh, Texas is not going to live up to that hype. Really? The last time they've had that hype, they did. So be careful with what you say. So here's where I'm going with this interesting situational thing. Texas, I mean, I don't want to consider them a lock. Okay, they don't normally live up to their talent. But if they were to make the Big 12 championship, and then Oklahoma has this path to make the Big 12 championship, how did this all get set up for these two teams last year in the Big 12 to play for the Big 12 championship? Did someone like figure this stuff out a few years ago? And they were like, you know what, this is going to be the year that they're going to be leaving for the SEC. So this the previous or the year right before, we need to make sure that Oklahoma and Texas have the path set up to play for the Big 12 championship. How did that get figured out?
Well, it's funny how that works, right? It's like almost like they knew. And honestly, it is very fitting, right? It's like, who's got the script? Who's got the script for college football this year? Because It's very fitting that more than likely, anything can happen, but you're looking at a possible Oklahoma-Texas Big 12 championship game and the last year that both of them are in the conference. I mean, it would be no better storybook ending for those two programs, but it's shaping up that way.
And if one of those teams does not live up to the hype, a team that could live up to the hype, a team that we were discussing here several minutes ago, maybe that's the Red Raiders' chance. This window of opportunity with the super senior laden team. I know we talked about that defense, but that offense, Tyler Shuck, he's 8-1 as a starter. If he can stay healthy, this offense is going to be great. They got that transfer from Austin P, Dre McCray, receiver. He's not listed as a starter right now, but he is listed in the 2 deep. He's really fast. That's the kind of receiver that Tech was needing last year. They have the size and the ability to go high point the ball, but they needed that speed to take that next level off the defense, and they got it with Dre McCray. He's another senior. This is a team full of seniors. This is a window of opportunity. Hey, if Oklahoma or Texas disappoint, plus money on the Red Raiders to win the Big 12. No, I don't know.
Well, I mean, why not? Because honestly, I've been saying it all year long. For me, Texas Tech this year is what Kansas State or TCU was last year. No one in their right mind predicted Kansas State versus TCU for the Big 12 championship last year. Certainly no one thought TCU would make the college football playoff last year. But both those teams were very good. I'm not taking anything away from either of them. They were both fantastic. But they also took advantage of a weaker Big 12 in the sense of Oklahoma was not what they typically are. Texas still disappointed, only winning, 8 games last year. Iowa State obviously was no good. Cyclones have been solid in previous years. Baylor, who had won the previous year, was no good. Oklahoma State struggled. So all things considered, the teams that perennially in the Big 12 had been really, really solid were down last year, which opened the door for teams like Kansas State, who was loaded with talent, TCU, who was loaded with talent, to make their run. And that's exactly what they did. And I think Texas Tech has an opportunity to do the exact same thing.
Oh, 100% agree. And there's a commentator for Fox Sports. His first name is Brock. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He's a former quarterback for Washington.
Oh, Heward? Is it Heward?
Yeah, thank you. Brock Heward. Okay. So I want to make sure I pronounce that name correctly before I'm mispronouncing everyone's name here going live on YouTube here. But Brock Heward. So for those of you college football junkies who like listening to like college football like on YouTube, like a replay of a game from 4 years ago while you're playing Xbox or something like that, Brock Heward, I've noticed this. He loves to discuss senior laden teams. He talked about it with Minnesota 4 years ago. He talked about it with TCU last year when he got to commentate at least one of their games against Baylor. And you know what? I see on that TV schedule right now that we've got a game on Fox Sports with Texas Tech against Oregon in week 2. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there's a good chance Brock Heward might be commentating that game. Well, guess what? I know something. Here's another hot take for you. I'm going to predict what an analyst is going to say on live television. Brock Heward is going to bring up that senior-laden experience for Texas Tech. I can already see it right now.
Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah.
It's kind of random there. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, every now and then I feel like the commentators tend to, like, sometimes like the play calls that you're watching on TV can tend to become a little bit predictable, you know?
Oh, yeah. In fact, Alex, I'm about to make a post on my college football Instagram page about predicting what some analysts are going to say this year.
Can you predict what Desmond Howard's playoff predictions will be? 'Cause I don't know if anybody can do that.
Maybe not that, but I can tell you he's going to have Michigan at least playing for the national championship. And I'll tell you, some of his arguments going to be this is Harbaugh's best team so far, and that might be true. And then he's going to say this is the year that Michigan finally wins in the postseason. He's going to word something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, God knows they need it, right? I mean, I believe that will be said a handful of times over the course of the first couple of months for sure. By
the way, another little hot take on what a college football personality might say this year. I think Reese Davis is going to have a take or two about Michigan. You remember back in 2018, Michigan lost the opener against Notre Dame, but they were playing really good football against subpar competition for like 10 straight weeks. And I mean, it was like every single game day, every single week. Reese Davis kept on saying, hey, Michigan's playing some of the best football in the country. Hey, don't overlook Michigan. I know they got to go to Columbus at the end of the season, but don't overlook the Wolverines. They're playing some of the best football in the country. And if you saw his preseason poll that he put out, he has Michigan number 1, Georgia at number 2. I already know he and Desmond Howard got something planned for game day with something regarding Michigan.
I could see it. I could 100%. I mean, yeah, Reese caught a lot of guys, I think, off guard from that. A lot of people were upset about Michigan being ranked 1 over Georgia. And, but I liked his response. He goes, right now, Michigan's got it all. They really don't have any glaring question marks on that team right now. Georgia, I wouldn't say has like major question marks, but Carson Beck is unproven. Whereas, JJ McCarthy is not. He is proven. So he's like, right now, if you're looking at the intangibles, the quarterback edge goes to Michigan until proven otherwise. He goes, and I very well could 2 weeks into the year, after I see Carson Beck, see what Georgia's done, be like, all right, you know what? Georgia for sure is number 1. They're right now, be honest with you. I mean, I really feel like Georgia and Clemson are interchangeable, or Georgia and Michigan are interchangeable. It's most polls, most people have them at 1 and 2, one way or another. Most people have them making the playoff. Best team in the SEC, best team in the Big Ten. Anything can happen, sure. But right now, I think it's just that. Rank them however you want. It's they're going to be 1, 2, or at least in the top 3 pretty much all year long.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And I actually, if Desmond Howard does say the words like, this is Michigan's best team yet under Harbaugh, well, I'm going to tend to agree with that statement. I actually do believe that as well. Your team is in good, is at a good place when the biggest question mark on the team is how can this position group get better?
Right.
You're in a good place. And they were already, worst case for those, what do they call them? Devil's advocates out there who want to argue that, well, Michigan wasn't elite last year because he lost to TCU and we saw what happened with TCU in the national championship. Whatever argument the Devil's advocates want to make about Michigan is still elite and they've still got, at the very worst, a really good receiving core. I would tend to agree that it's not an elite receiving core, but I think they have an elite team because they don't have any glaring weaknesses. And right now, their biggest question is, can JJ McCarthy take that next step? Can the receivers be a little bit more explosive? Can they be more reliable on a consistent basis? That's their biggest question. Yeah. That's the biggest question. Yeah, this is a complete team for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, right now, for me, best team in the Big Ten. I know the Big Ten East is solid. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, a lot of talent there. But Michigan is the favorite to win the conference again until proven otherwise. I believe that.
One other little hot take in terms of what a college football personality might say this year. I think this guy is going to say it on multiple platforms. Joel Klatt will say these following words. He'll make the following statement. The Big Ten East is the best division in college football this year. He's going to say that on multiple platforms. I already know. And by the way, he's probably going to have a couple of takes with his former college with Colorado.
Oh,
He's
yeah,
an alum. So
no doubt.
I
No.
already know he's going to have a few takes there. He probably already has, but I bet he's going to say those exact words when he's commentating. I don't know, say Ohio State, Wisconsin or something. I don't know. He's going to say, I think the Big Ten East is the best division in college football this year because maybe Alabama doesn't look as elite. Maybe LSU, while maybe they have an outside chance of the West, but they're not this shoe in to make the playoff. And then you got Mississippi State with the first-year coach, Auburn with the first-year coach. Those kinds of things. He's going to have the argument because he loves the Big Ten.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, man, when he's on like freaking Big Noon Kickoff or whatever, calling the games all the time, and that's pretty much all you're engrossed is either Big 12 or Big 10 games. He has to show his bias a little bit towards the Big 10. But Connor, I do want to stick in the Big 10. Actually, well, we won't segue out of it yet. There's one surprising path that you do have, and it actually does happen to be in the Big 10 East as well.
If I'm not mistaken, I think you have the same. Well, I'm not sure if my record prediction is going to be the same as yours, but I think there's an outside chance it could happen. But you made this prediction for this particular team, and I think there is a better chance than people realize, and that is the chance for a team to go bowling in the East Division that's not getting talked about. And I'm not talking about Michigan State. I'm not talking about Maryland. I think Maryland will get to a bowl game, but that's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about Rutgers. Rutgers getting to a bowl game in what Joel Klatt will believe is the best division in college football this year? Yes. So statistically, at the end of the season, if you were to break down strength of schedules, I am sure Rutgers' strength of schedule is going to be pretty difficult because it's going to be weighted down or weighted up, however you want to word that, with teams like Penn State and Michigan and Ohio State. I get it. It is difficult. But at the same time, Rutgers' schedule provides a path for them to maybe, just maybe, eke out 6 wins. Now, Alex, I know you predicted on Gridiron Expert like a month ago or so for Rutgers to go 6-6, and I can totally see that because when you look at their first, I think it's 7 games, they've got 5 of their first 7 games that are pretty manageable. And something else, we saw this with Kansas and Syracuse last year. When a team overachieves, a team that's projected to be a 4 or 5 win team, if that, when those teams get to a bowl game, it's because they overachieve in the first half of the season because their schedule sets up the opportunity. Then they kind of fade in the second half. They get to a bowl game maybe, and then they'll get beat in their bowl game. But they got there. They overachieved. And for those who maybe are betting on their over, they cashed in that as well. But Rutgers has the kind of schedule that Kansas had a year ago. They get a couple of conference opponents who might struggle this year early in the season at home with Northwestern and with a team who's probably going to struggle offensively this year with Michigan State. And then you get a couple of, a few manageable non-conference games with Temple, Wagner, and who's the other team? Virginia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all going to, is it Piscataway?
All of them are going to Piscataway.
Yeah. So all those games that I just mentioned are at Rutgers. And guess what Rutgers is actually going to have this year, which everyone is overlooking? They're going to have a good defense. I'm not saying it's great. I'm not saying it's elite. It may or may not be as good as Texas Tech. I don't know. But I think they'll have at least a good defense, a top half of the Big Ten in defense. This was a team last year that didn't have a ton of depth on defense. They had some injuries before the year. They still overachieved on defense. And now those guys that were once projected starters last year that did not end up playing are back, plus the guys that ended up playing. They have depth. Rutgers has depth on defense. They got some talent there. That Max Melton guy at corner, I think he's going to be an NFL draft selection. They got a couple guys at defensive end, maybe a linebacker who might get selected maybe like in the 5th or 6th round, but they've got talent there. And again, they've got if you're to look up difficulties of schedule at the end of the year, Rutgers is going to be up there. So people are going to say, how dare you say it's not that difficult of a schedule? Look where it's ranked. And they still did that. It's not like that difficult. They have these manageable games, individual games that are going to weigh down that schedule, that are going to help them. But one thing that'll be interesting, can they go undefeated in those games that I just mentioned? Because if they don't, they're probably not getting to a bowl game because that back half of the season is really difficult. At Indiana is winnable. Speaking of the defense, I do not think Indiana's defense is going to be good at all this year. And then they get an interesting spot, another interesting spot at home with Maryland, the last game of the year. This is going to be a Maryland team that's probably going to be coming off of a couple losses there towards the end of the season. You're looking at a Maryland team that's probably not going to be up for a near Six Bowl bid, nor the Big Ten championship. So will they be motivated against a Rutgers team who might be needing that 6th win to get to a bowl game? I'm telling you, watch this team make a bowl game, or at the very least get close to it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Obviously, I predicted them to go bowling. I'm standing by that. I think some people were, oh, you're just screwing around. There's no way. No, I think I've got. Hold on. I think we've got a. We got a nice little Rutgers helmet right here. Yeah,
there
we got
you go.
Represent the Scarlet Knights, baby. And I will stand by that. Greg Schiano came in tasked with a major rebuilding project. And everybody knew that, right? He came in there, second stint with the program. And no one expected him to come in and immediately contend, but he exceeded expectations his first year. Granted, it was that COVID season, but still, when he beat Michigan State in week 1, it was like, holy crap, this is way better than anything that we had under Chris Ash previously, right? And now he's slowly been building. And we always say, typically around year 3, 4, 5, if you can last that long with a new coach, that's when they're going to take that next step forward and kind of break through. And I think this is it, because like you just mentioned, those non-conference games are huge. And really for me, it's those 4 of those first 5 games, like you mentioned, with a lot of those in the non-conference, they've got to win, right? Sandwiched in there is that road game at Michigan. They're not beating Michigan. And that's the thing with Rutgers, right? They're not beating the Big Ten elites. In the Big Ten East, you're not beating Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, probably not beating Maryland. You're not beating those guys. Then you draw Wisconsin and Iowa, arguably the top 2 teams out of the West, both on the road, we should add. You're not beating them either. So you can cross those out. So what you said is, if you're a team like Rutgers, or there was someone like even Florida State, and I'll get to that in a second. The season is not a full season, in my opinion. It's a season of a couple games that will define how successful you'll be by season's end. And Rutgers is, as you mentioned, in a prime position to start strong. They lose one of those games that you mentioned, they're done. They're not going bowling. They might get close. They might get 5-7, which, let's keep in mind, a few years ago, they slipped into a bowl game at 5-7 because I think it was Texas A&M had to cancel against Wake Forest. And hey, Rutgers is a good school. They're a strong academic school. 5-7 might slip you in with an APR. You never know.
Yes.
Rice did that just last year, so it's not impossible. But if you want to truly earn it, to know that you truly got to that 6-win mark, that was a true bowl game, Northwestern, to me, easy money. And Northwestern going to be pretty rough this year with everything that's been going on there. Temple. They barely survived Temple last year. Should be a better team, stronger up front on both sides of the ball. Virginia Tech. That really, for me, Virginia Tech is the one that is the true toss-up for me for Rutgers. What do we expect from Virginia Tech? Year 2 under Brent Pry. Do they take that next step offensively? That's it. But you get it in Piscataway, and that could be the difference maker. So I'm right there with you in everything you just said. And I give him that edge. I give him that 6-6 edge.
Also, I don't want to call it like a strength, but I mean, at least in terms of in respect to their roster, the strengths are at least what they're going to be relying on for Rutgers is going to be their offense and defensive lines.
Yep.
Guess what the question is for Virginia Tech? It's up front on both lines of scrimmage. And they got to get, like you said, they got to go to Piscataway. So, yeah, I think Rutgers is going to find a way to win there. This is going to be the team that's winning all these 20-17 kind of games early in the season. You're like, okay, so they beat Northwestern 24-13. Okay, it's a decent win for Rutgers. And then the next thing you know they're beating these teams 17-13 or 21-17, and they're 4-2 or whatever that, or maybe 5 and however that schedule sets up. They're 4-2 or whatever, 4-1. This is a team that I think that's going to surprise some people. And another pattern that I've seen, Alex, and I have a theory on why this is, but it seems like, let's say it's Rutgers' schedule, but you flip-flop the first and the second half of the schedule. There's less of a chance that they will overachieve than if you kept it the way it is with the first half of the schedule. And so teams that overachieve, they start well and then they fade. It's never vice versa.
No.
And so I've always questioned that, and I have a theory. Maybe it's because those teams that are overachieving, they're really not that great, and they don't have the depth. And so as the season wears along, that depth gets tested, and then that's when you really see their true colors or the true makeup of the team. And so if you were to do it vice versa, then they don't overachieve because then the depth gets tested and now they're not pulling out all those close games as they would if that schedule was how it is for Rutgers or how it was for Kansas last year. That's a take by me. I don't really know what that answer is. It could be that. And I'm sure, for those college football fans out there that love to, they kind of like to talk up every team. They might call me a hater for that comment, but I'm looking at it in at a realistic standpoint here. So maybe that's it. I don't know.
Yeah, I take it more as a possible depth thing, but I also take it as a mental thing as well. I think a lot of people forget how big of a mental game college football, really any sport is as well. So you take Rutgers in this example and you flip it, and those their final 4 games are against Ohio State, Iowa, Penn State, and Maryland. None of which Rutgers will be favored in, none of which I think Rutgers wins. So you take a Rutgers team that starts 0-4, and let's make them 0-6. Let's say they play Wisconsin and Michigan after that. So 0-6. Well, you're a team that's 0-6. You got easy games coming up, but mentally you're like, to make a bowl game, we have to win every single game the rest of the year. We've got beat up and beat down for the last 6 weeks. Not only is it a depth concern, but it's like, how do you wake yourself up to go into a game at 0-6, 1-5? How do you get excited to play that game? Where's your effort? Yes, the goal is still in sight. Yes, you could win all of those games, but mentally, as a player, as a coaching staff, as a fan base, how do you even get hype for a team that's record is so bad, even when you realize it's not as bad as it looks. It's not as bleak as it looks. So I definitely think there are a lot of factors that certainly go into that.
Mental block and depth. It's the mental toughness and then the depth. Yeah,
100%. I want to segue out of those surprising pass. We got roughly 30 minutes left here in today's show, and so I wanted to kind of run through as many as we can of these hot takes of yours. I know you mentioned those before the show. I like the ones that you've brought up. So hit us with a few, and we'll discuss them.
Well, I remember one of them that I sent you, so you're going to have to give me the team, and then that'll remind me maybe of the take. But I know the first one that I sent you. So 2 teams that are being labeled as sleeper teams and their respective division or conference. One I'll discuss first is Duke. So I agree that I think Duke returns a good team this year. I think there's a good chance they could be better than they were last year, at least in terms of their power rating. Not their record, though. I think there is an outside chance this team does not make a bowl game. They probably will. I like the roster, at least the starters. I don't like the depth. It's very questionable. But I like the coaching staff, and the coaching staff is good. I don't know how they kept all those coordinators right now, but they did. So maybe they can overachieve a little bit, but this is not a team that's going to go 8-4 or 9-3. It's not. And I know that coming off of last year and 9-win team, first year of Mike Elko, a year ago, many people were projecting Duke to be a 1 at most win team in the ACC, a 3-9, 4-8 team. And they went and they doubled that win total for the regular season and then beat a UCF team who just did not care to be in that bowl game. Had a lot of opt-outs before the game too. And so Duke's power rating, because of that, went up several spots. And now I think Duke's getting a little bit overhyped from the media. And I don't want to just label it as media, but preview magazines and a lot of individuals are doing it. But not the sports books. Their win totals opened up at like 6.5. That's what they're currently set at. So had a ton of people taking those overs, but I'd be careful with that because this is a team that they are very Riley Leonard dependent on. Like they are quarterback dependent team. If Leonard goes down with an injury, they're done. Like you're looking at a 3-9, 4-8 team at best if Leonard's out. But if they have any injuries to maybe their left tackle, who's probably going to be an NFL draft selection next April in the first few rounds, if he goes down with an injury, okay, the rest of the offensive line doesn't have a ton of they have some returning experience, but there's no depth behind 3 or 4 quality starters that return. Then the receivers, they got their top 3 back, but there's no depth behind them. And then on defense, the front 7 doesn't have a ton of talent, and there's a pretty steep drop off from the first to second string. So my point being, Yeah, it's a little bit of a high variance team. Maybe they overachieve and go 7-5, but this is, again, it's not an 8-4 or 9-3 team. There's no sleeper talk here. You want to pick a sleeper team in the ACC? Go with the team that, I mean, it's kind of hard to pick one when you got Florida State and Clemson in the ACC, but if you wanted to go with one, not named North Carolina, because no one's really going to be sleeping on Drake May, I guess go with Louisville because of their schedule. Duke last year, you know how many teams Duke played with the winning record last year? Including UCF, I think it was like 3, maybe 4.
They beat 2. Yeah, they beat 2 with the winning record. Lost to a couple. They lost like North Carolina and teams like that. But yeah, it was not a. And that's the point I was going to make when you were done was the fact that Duke was not. Again, they're not a bad team. They weren't a bad team last year. They're not going to be a bad team this year. But it's one of those things where it's like, and I don't even want to come a one-hit wonder either. But great, you won 9 games last year. Well, how did you win 9 games? Because you had a very favorable schedule. Now you've got to play Clemson. Then you've got Notre Dame. So Clemson and Notre Dame, just like that, in the first, 5 weeks of the year, very well could be 2 losses. That's half of your total loss that you had last year. Then you've got to go to Florida State. Got to go to Louisville, as you just mentioned. Got to go to North Carolina. Pittsburgh, never easy. And that's hoping that you also don't slip up to an inferior opponent, like a team like Virginia or someone like that. So, again, the schedule is like 10 times harder than it was last year. So it's one of those things where it's like Duke is probably going to be a lot better than their final record shows.
Yeah.
But they just can't get over the hump against some of these more elite teams.
Right. And then they still have to play Dave Doran's bunch in the Wolfpack. And, it's interesting about NC State is, last year they were getting all this hype and now everyone seemed like just forgotten about them. And look, yeah, NC State's probably not going to have as much talent as they did last year. But what's kind of cool about those kind of teams? There's no one talking about them. Everyone's forgotten about them. And Dave Doran is one of the better coaches in that conference. And so they're going to have that chip on their shoulder. And now they play the role that Duke did last year. NC State will this year. They play the role of the hunter because no one's looking at them. I'm sure some ACC coaches and players are aware of them, but in terms of the public, the general public, no one's looking at NC State because didn't they lose that Devin Leary guy to Kentucky? Didn't they lose like 8 starters defensively and all that? It's like, yeah. Okay, so then they're going to be done for. Really? In the ACC, there's Florida State and there's Clemson or Clemson, Florida State, whatever order you want to put them. And then there's like North Carolina or maybe Louisville with their schedule. But it's a pretty steep drop-off after those top 2. And then you've gotten, Virginia and Boston College and Syracuse and Georgia Tech down there. There's not a lot of difference between teams. And so that's why I think with Duke played 3 or 4 teams with a winning record last year. Now they're going to be playing 8 teams this year who finished with a winning record last year.
Yep.
That's a total change. And you're looking at a team that overachieved last year. I mean, there's regression screaming here. At least in the win total. Yeah,
and that's the thing, right? It's Duke is going talent-wise, in theory, is going to be stronger than they were last year. We see this every year too. It's just the way that college football goes in the sense of sometimes you get lucky and the schedule lines up great for you. You get some of the big games at home, or you end up playing teams that aren't nearly as good as they were made out to be. Or you catch a team on a bad year, or you avoid some teams, kind of like Oklahoma's doing this year. But then some years you just get a horrible draw, and it's like, dang, we have all this talent, but we get a horrible schedule draw. So we might only win 7 games, where on a normal year, the year before, 2 years ago, however, we might have won 9, 10 games and continued for the conference. It's just the luck of the draw. But I fully agree with you that Duke is not going to replicate the success they had last year. I still think they could salvage 7, 8 wins, maybe somewhere around there, but 8 might be a little much. I think 6 and 7 probably more likely. But again, the talent is there to make some noise. And one of the things too is, I'll say is this, and then we'll move on to the next hot take. You play Clemson in the season opener, and you play Notre Dame on September 30th. So you have 2 possible top 10 teams that you face in the first month of the season. In between that, you've got Lafayette, Northwestern, and UConn, all of which should be wins for Duke. If Duke somehow manages to snag an upset over Notre Dame or Clemson, both of which are at home for the Blue Devils, I say all bets are off.
Yeah.
I say all bets are off. Anything could happen. If they split those 2 games, watch out. Probably not going to happen, though. Probably going to go 0-2 in those. Probably will be 3-2 heading into the bye week, and then that's where they have to make up their ground and find a way to get to 6 wins.
And by the way, like the teams that Duke played with a winning record last year, what was the best team they played with the winning record? North Carolina?
Wake Forest? Yeah, North Carolina, Wake Forest.
Wake Forest was falling apart there at the end of the year, but yeah.
Right, yeah. Probably those two, yeah.
And didn't North Carolina play in one-score games with everyone?
Pretty much, yeah. Look, man, when you know your team's bad and your defense is bad when Virginia puts up like 30-something points on you. That was it was rough.
The only team that North Carolina shut down last year was Virginia Tech.
Yeah, that didn't say too much.
So we've really yet to see this sleeper Blue Devil team play a team with serious quality from top to bottom, and they're going to be facing more of those this year. 3 off the bat that I can think of: the Clemson, Notre Dame, and Florida State. But then you got some more tricky games in there, which you really didn't have much of last year. I don't see it with, at least in terms of like some breakthrough top 20 team. I don't see that. I don't see that at all. I think the ceiling is 8-4, and I think the floor, without unforeseen injury, is 4-8. They're probably going to be somewhere in the middle there, probably 6-6 if I had to guess, maybe 7-5.
Yep, I think it's fair. I got them at 7-5 for what it's worth. So go see what happens from there. Connor, hit us with another one. We're running low on time here, so let's get another one in.
South Carolina is not going to be as good as people think this year, as most people think. I know a lot of people were complaining about them not being in the top 25. This is not a top 25 team. I don't think they're a top 30 team. I don't think they're a top 35 team. I don't even know if they're going to be a top 40 team. Now, in the power ratings, they might finish like 38th at the end of the year, but I think their record's probably going to be around 6-6. I do not think this. I think they're in trouble this year. That line of scrimmage on both sides of the football is in a scary position right now. And if I'm not mistaken, doesn't the SEC pride itself on line of scrimmage play?
Oh, yeah, battle in the trenches. Yeah.
And don't they still have to play North Carolina and Clemson in the non-conference?
Sure do.
Now, what I will say for South Carolina is that their last 4 games of the year are all going to be at home. That's probably going to help to a degree. But my goodness, you're talking about a team that also, I said the line of scrimmage is a question for them. They gave up like 9 or 10 sacks in the spring game. The defensive line, that's not because the defensive line's good, by the way. Okay, so it's a bad look right now for the line of scrimmage for South Carolina. They weren't good last year on the offensive line, and they lost by far their top 3 best players on the offensive line. And they're going to be having guys playing offensive tackle this year that should not be playing offensive tackle. Yep. And then you got a very inconsistent Spencer Rattler, and then a new look receiving core outside of Antoine Juice Wells. By the way, the receiving core right now, they're not even 100% healthy, and neither is Wells. Like, there was a report that came out today that they're kind of up in the air for week 1. I bet they're going to be – the starters, at least, are going to be fine, in my opinion. But they've got question marks everywhere. The defense, the linebackers and secondary, the starters look fine. But, my goodness, they don't have any depth there either. It just – and with their schedule, we know South Carolina plays a difficult schedule every year. They've overachieved the last 2 years. Do you know what's not sustainable on a year-to-year basis is overachieving? We talked about that with Duke. This is screaming regression here for South Carolina. I actually would not be surprised if they went 5-7.
No, that's the hot take right there. It's a losing season, but
6-6 is a very likely possibility because I honestly do not see 7-5.
Well, I think a lot, and that's the thing. I think if you said this right now, if we had a live stream full of South Carolina fans, you'd be getting eaten alive right now.
Oh, yeah.
Here's one of the things, and you and I have actually talked about this on previous streams before in recent years, is the mindset of like recency bias, right? And I think there's a lot of people that are looking at South Carolina and saying, look what they did against Tennessee, look what they did against Clemson, that's just going to carry over to this year. And that's not how it works. It's a brand new year. Yes, you can look to last year to maybe get a little bit of guidance and insight on what could happen this year, but to just say, oh, because we beat Tennessee without Hendon Hooker, although I will say they were going to win regardless if Hooker was healthy or not, and we beat Clemson in Death Valley, we're going to be good. And that's just not the case. The schedule, kind of similar in a similar situation as Duke here, does not line up well for South Carolina. I mean, you mentioned North Carolina in week 1. That's tough. Going to Georgia is tough. Going to Tennessee is tough. At Missouri, not going to be easy. At A&M. And yeah, it's great. You get those final 4 games at home. One's against Jacksonville State, another against Vandy, so it should be wins there. But one of them's against Clemson. So, if you count those up, UNC, Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, A&M, Clemson, if they lost all 6 of those games, that's 6-6. Meaning they have to win everything else. That would include, a win over Florida, Mississippi State, Kentucky, guys like that. So I'm right there with you. I don't think that people realize that. I got South Carolina at 7-5. I know there's a lot of people out there that had the game at 8-4, 9-3, 10-2, and that is absurd.
No,
it's absurd. 10-2. You want to go 10-2? So you're telling me they're only going to lose to Georgia and Tennessee? I don't think you beat Clemson again. North Carolina, I've got them beating North Carolina. That was such a big toss-up game for me, Connor, that, it's one of those things where I'm not going to be surprised if they lose that game, in which case I'd have them at 6-6. So, yeah, I'm kind of on the same page with you there, but I think so many people are focusing on what happened last year, and my favorite argument is, okay, we beat Clemson last year in Death Valley. Now Clemson comes to Williams-Brice Stadium. We've got it. It's in the bag.
Yeah.
No, that's not how it's going to work.
Right. As I said, 6-6 is probably what's going to happen, but gosh, 5-7 would not surprise me one bit. So here's how I'll finish this off with the South Carolina take. The range for South Carolina. Now, I'm not going to give this 4 or 5 game range like some might. I'm going to give a 2 game range. Anyone can give a 5 or 6 game range. Their range is like 5-7 to 7-5, not 7-5 to 9-3. Right. That's what a lot of people are going to have. Nope, that's not happening.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. I think that's a fair assessment. I think 5-7. Because this isn't a team that says bad 4-8, but it's one of those things like, you're 300 Beamer, we should be good, and it's like there's not going to be a bad team. South Carolina is not going to be a bad team per se. They're not going to be elite. They're not going to be good. They're not a true SEC East contender. That belongs to Georgia and Tennessee. And honestly, the third best team could arguably be Missouri, possibly.
Yeah.
That's really about it.
I put you on. I put that pressure on you. You had to say it since I'm here, but it's okay if you have Kentucky there.
No, I don't even remember what my standings are. I think I've got Kentucky. I think Kentucky's like at 7-5. Missouri. I think I've got Missouri. I've actually got Missouri at 6-6. I'm being quite honest with you.
I can understand. It's a really difficult schedule.
I've got them beating Kansas State. I think the ceiling for Missouri for me would be 8-4 probably. I'm looking at the schedule right now. Maybe 7-5. I don't think Missouri's to the point where they can beat LSU. They can't beat Georgia. They can't beat Tennessee. I don't think they beat Arkansas. So, I do think they beat Kansas State. So you sprinkle in the South Carolina game will be a big one. The Florida game definitely will be a big one. And I wouldn't sleep on Vandy either, for that matter. I would not sleep on that Vanderbilt team, who's going to be a lot better than people think.
Yeah, I think more highly of this Missouri team than most do. So my prediction for Missouri this year is probably going to be either 7-5 or 8-4. I've gone back and forth between those.
Okay, yeah.
The ceiling for me for Missouri, it's probably going to be crazy to some people. 9-3.
Hey, that would be a heck of a year. Year. Losses to what? Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU.
Yeah, I don't like their chances, obviously, in Athens. LSU, I don't like the spot at Kentucky right after LSU. That's the game I'm kind of like, I don't know. I think they can win those home games against Kansas State, Florida, South Carolina, and I'm not that high on Joe Milton right now. So I think they can beat Tennessee at home, and they've had Arkansas's number here recently. And the way those wins kind of maybe stack up at the end of the season as they're gaining more confidence. And Missouri has depth this year, and those teams at the end of their schedule in Florida and Arkansas don't have as much depth as Missouri does this year. So
right.
I think that could be put to the test late in the year. So, yeah, I think the ceiling for Missouri is 9-3. But, again, that 2-game range that I like to do, 7-5 to 9-3. But, see, my range for South Carolina is what a lot of people would say for Missouri.
Right.
Nope.
Funny how that works, right? Funny how that works.
This Missouri team is going to be really good this year. We'll see whether or not their schedule allows the record to showcase that.
Sure, I agree with that. I think we got time. We got time for one more. I think we got time. I know you had a couple more, but I know we're running low on time. So give us your last big hot take that you want to share with us, and we'll wrap things up.
Well, okay. What were some of the ones that I gave you that I sent to you? Just say the team.
We've talked about two of them quite a bit. So if you want to talk about one a team that we haven't talked about, you could do Auburn.
I don't think that'd be the hottest take in the world.
You've got Texas Tech, Missouri, and Auburn were the four you sent me, or the three.
I think Auburn's going to finish with a winning record potentially after their bowl game, or maybe even in the regular season. But I don't think that's the hottest take. I mean, they've got a win total of like 6.5. So, but okay. So here's a hot take I'll throw out there. I think South Alabama might be the top G5 team in the country this year. I like this team a ton. They've got some dudes on that team that I think are going to be drafted specifically in their secondary defensively, but they might have a wide receiver or two that really showcase their talent this year. I mean, they've had a couple wide receivers drafted over the last few years. This has been a rich area of recruiting for South Alabama. Now they finally have a coach to put it all together. This is another senior-laden team. So we talked about Missouri and Texas Tech and Oregon State. They've got a lot of upperclassmen leadership. This South Alabama team does as well. And people are forgetting this team won 10 games last year. And they were 4 points away from 5 points technically away from topping Troy and maybe being the team that everyone remembers about the Sun Belt last year. This team is going to be what Troy was last year, and I think better. Because Troy last year was not that great on offense, had a special defense. I think South Alabama is going to be really good offensively this year and potentially special on defense. And they return top 10 production, both top 20 in offense and defensive returning production, which averages out to top 10 nationally in overall production. For a team that won 10 games last year, this is the team to beat in the Sun Belt. I think they are winning the Sun Belt this year. They've got 4 challenging road games. And believe me, it's by far their most difficult games. They're all on the road against Tulane and Oklahoma State in the non-conference, and then against James Madison and Troy within Sun Belt play. But I'm telling you right now, they're going to win at least one of those games, and do not be shocked if they actually split those 4 games. And my gosh, if they actually beat Tulane, I think there's a chance they could win 3 of those games because I think they're good enough to beat Troy. I think they're good enough to beat James Madison, and I think they are good enough to beat either Oklahoma State or Tulane. So I said they would win at least 1 or if not 2 of those games.
Yeah, I think Kane Womack, man, he's going to be a guy that by the end of this year is going to be gunning for a Power 5 job. I mean, he's going to be one of the top candidates because this is 10 wins last year, has an opportunity to do it again this year, whether he does it in the regular season or with the bowl game. You talk about production, 18 starters total back for South Alabama, 9 on each side of the ball. Huge fan also of Carter Bradley. I think he's phenomenal. Yes. I think over a 3,000-yard passer last year. They got a 1,000-yard rusher on top of that. I mean, arguably will be one of, if not the top offense in the Sun Belt this year, which is pretty dang exciting.
And then the defense is going to be one of the top, if not the top.
Right. And that's the beauty of it, right? You've got a team that actually has it put all together. The biggest thing for South Alabama is in terms of being the top group of 5 team, maybe making a New Year's 6 bowl game, which for once I'd love to see. I'd love to see a Sun Belt team slip into a New Year's 6. South Alabama in the Fiesta Bowl or the Cotton Bowl would be awesome.
Yeah.
But they've got to find a way. I think it's really important for them to split the games against Tulane and Oklahoma State. That's going to be.
They will.
Yeah, that's going to be the key. Split those, and then probably not lose a game in conference play. I think it'd be really hard to see a 2-loss Sun Belt team get into a New Year's 6 game over the likes of someone out of the American, like a Tulane or UTSA. Mountain West, you got Boise State in there, who's got a handful of opportunities to make some noise. So that's going to be the key for them if they want to get into a New Year's 6.
Yeah. We'll see about them getting to New Year's 6, but I really like this team's chances of being so like the best overall G5 team. I just don't know if they have the path to represent themselves in that role, but I like this roster more than any G5 team in the country. And honestly, it's not even close in terms of just like the talent, the raw talent that's returning and the known entities. I like this team more than any other G5 team in the country. And I understand they're playing at Tulane. It's going to be difficult to win. So like I said, the path may not be there, but my gosh, I love this roster more than any other G5 team in the country.
Yeah, I think I'll be up there with you. I think honestly, a game I'd love to see. I love South Alabama and their roster and what they've got going on. Maybe second behind that might be for me in terms of group of 5 would be UTSA. I would love to see
UTSA's roster.
Yeah, I would love to see South Alabama play UTSA this year. I think that would be a heck of a matchup. Honestly, it'd be great if that could be a bowl game for us. If neither makes a New Year's 6 bowl game or does something special, I would love to see that as a bowl game because those are 2 really good teams led by 2 strong quarterbacks, led by 2 strong defenses that are going to make some noise in their respective conferences this year. So, I think that Tulane game, which for everybody here watching, spoiler alert, we've got on Monday our week 1 predictions coming out, our week 1 under the radar games, because we're going to do individual videos for like the top games, like your Florida State, LSU, UNC, South Carolina, stuff like that. Those are going to be individual prediction videos, but 5 games that might fly under the radar that are still going to be good and you need to watch. South Alabama, Tulane's one of them. So that's one that's going to, people aren't going to talk about on next Saturday night, but it's going to be fantastic football.
Everyone's talking about, hey, doesn't Tulane play Ole Miss in week 2? Hey, Tulane plays South Alabama in week 1. They better not. I mean, Tulane's not going to be probably not overlooked South Alabama. The coaching staff and the players know what's coming to New Orleans. But again, most of the public, they're overlooking that. I don't know why. South Alabama won 10 games last year. That's the most quiet double-digit win team I've ever heard or seen of.
Yeah, I think part of it was, I don't know. You go 10-2 in the regular season, and I think our man Charles just said it right there. They got killed by Western Kentucky in their bowl game, so
yeah,
it was like, I think people, if you watch that game, you go, whatever. It wasn't even close. I mean, Western Kentucky and Austin Reed just torched them. And what was it, the New Orleans Bowl or something like that? I mean, it was pretty ugly. So I think, not to say that people would be talking about South Alabama had they won that game, but it was something that I think people just kind of, aren't thinking much about. And when you think Sun Belt right now too, I think a lot of people tend to think of the perennial powers, which lately have been App State, Coastal Carolina. You look at Troy from last year, just because they won the whole thing. So you've got some teams, and that's the funny thing, right? It's like South Alabama's flying under the radar when they really shouldn't be. Like you just said, I don't know many teams that can go one season and win 10 games and then still be under the radar heading in to the next year.
Yeah. You know who the next most quiet double-digit win team or a team coming off a double-digit win season is?
Who's that?
Oregon State.
There you go. Of course, the Beavers.
Had to finish it off with a Beaverism.
Oh, the way to come full circle. I like that. Yeah, that was well played. Well played. Well, Connor, man, dude, that was fantastic. I love the hot take. I love the points. Love the surprise teams. A lot of which we agree on, I would say, which is per usual. I think that's pretty on par for the course with what when we typically discuss. But before we let you go, I mean, any final parting words that you kind of want to share with everybody?
Well, you were just saying how you and I think a lot alike in a lot of ways. We also had the exact same record in our Bowl Mania pool.
Yeah, that is very true. That was you're the odds of that.
Too. Yeah, we both went 30-13.
Yeah, that was pretty unreal. And I think who won that? I think I came in second or third. I know I got a little bit of money, which I was excited about.
You and I finished second and third. Okay. A guy who had TCU being Michigan finished first.
Wow. TCU fan, I assume. I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know. This guy that I know, I've known him since high school. Well, actually, no, since middle school. He usually goes for broke with things, and so I think he was trying to separate himself because he was probably going to finish at least in the top 5. So he's like, this is my chance to get up to number 1, I guess. And he's like, I'm willing to take the chance with a team that's only lost once all year. So
sorry, I'm posting your Instagram link in the chat right now for anybody who wants to go follow College Football Encyclopedia. He's got some great content over there. And just real quick before you leave, tell us what's coming out over really the course of these next 2 weeks. I mean, we got week 0 coming up, which is huge, but then next week is when things really get started.
So over the next several days, next couple of weeks, I'm going to be posting the predictions with what I think the analysts will say or predict for this year. I'm going to be posting breakthrough teams, surprise teams, storyline teams. I kind of separate them into different categories because, example, like Oregon State and Texas Tech, if they were to break through this year, everyone's been talking. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people have been talking about them. They wouldn't exactly shock anyone. So those are the storyline teams more so. So that's why I put them in different categories. But I got that post coming out. Then I've got breakthrough players. Then I'm going to be talking about September surprises. September surprises like maybe Texas over Alabama, maybe Texas Tech over Oregon, maybe South Alabama over Tulane, games like that. I'm going to be posting that. I've also got my Encyclopedia 8, which are my 8 preseason takes that I make. And then I've got my regression. Last year, it was regression. I picked 5 teams from the Power 5 and 5 teams from the G5 to regress in their regular season win total. I went 10 for 10 on that, and 8 of the 10 regressed by at least 3 wins or 3 They had 3 more losses than they did the previous year. And so this year, I'm including some progression in there because I don't think that we have as many regression teams because we were coming off the super senior season in 2021 last year, so I had more to choose from. But this year, I want to talk about some progression, like maybe Oklahoma,
Right.
Maybe Memphis or SMU. They've got some manageable schedules as well. So yeah, I'm going to be posting that as well. But I've got a lot of exciting content in the next several days before week 1.
Well, that's what we like to hear, man. I know I'll be on the lookout for it. College Football Encyclopedia, Connor's page, again, is linked in the live stream chat. His handle is CFE Grind on Instagram. So go check him out. Go give him a follow. His following is growing pretty quickly. I mean, it's really been taking off over these last couple months. So
the more I post, the more followers I get.
That's how it goes. I mean, typically, that's how it correlates, man. If only YouTube was like that, man. We cranked out over 1,000 videos. And yeah, I don't know. We're still working on that algorithm. We'll figure it out one day. But Connor, really appreciate you and for stopping by. Great analysis all day. And I have a feeling we'll be doing this again later on this season. No doubt about it.
Well, thank you for having me on. And I've always really respected your content. And again, I appreciate you having me on your channel.
Hey, we appreciate you, Connor. You take care, man.
You as well. Thank you for having me again.
I'll wrap things up here with our man, Connor Hibbett, again, over at CFE Grind. Again, great stuff as always over on his page. And with that, guys, we'll wrap up this first little bit of the season, right? Our little preseason preview as we head into week 0 on Saturday. Reminder, again, every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central Time, we will have a live stream right here on YouTube. So mark it on your calendars. The time's not changing. The date's not changing. We're going to be here. Call-in shows. We'll, of course, be having Connor back. No doubt about it. So you want to stay tuned for that. Tomorrow, Notre Dame, Navy, that prediction video comes out. Friday, Hawaii, Vanderbilt, that prediction video comes out. And then we've got tons of prediction videos analysis coming out next week for the beginning of week 1. And our first little bit of expert picks as well have already been posted to our website. So if you've signed up for those, first picks are up for this weekend. If you have not, go sign up today. Best picks in the country, guaranteed winning record. And if you sign up before the season starts, you are not subject to a price change next year, and you'll get a little bit of a discount heading into next year as well. So make sure you take advantage of that before the season starts on August 31st. We'll give you an extra week. But guys, we appreciate you, all your support as always, from Doggy, College Football Guy, Matthew Hazelhorse. We really appreciate you and your support and the super chat as well. Louise, we appreciate you. Scotty B, the Baylor King, as always, Clement, Robert, Charter Nicholson, Christian Fernandez, Ryan Dobis, John Sarian, Tom Piper, everybody else that has been in the chat tonight. We appreciate you. We appreciate all your support. Stay tuned for the videos tomorrow, and we'll see you next time. DM, our man DM, how could I forget? We appreciate you. I hope you got to hear and enjoy that Rutgers talk. Still got our helmet over here. Got a little bit from Comic Dude. But we appreciate all of you. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you back here next Tuesday on the Gridiron Expert. Good night, everybody.